Algeria a rupt relațiile diplomatice cu Maroc, pe care îl acuză de complot împotriva sa. Evenimentul nu este o surpriză pentru marocani, obișnuiți deja să fie folosiți de oficialii algerieni pentru a deturna atenția propriilor cetățeni de la problemele interne ale Algeriei. Tensiunile au apărut după ce regele Marocului, Mohammed al VI-lea, a ținut un discurs prin care îndemna la o reconciliere autentică între cele două țări pentru a face față mai bine împreună provocărilor economice și de securitate din Nordul Africii. L-am invitat la o discuție despre complicata situație istorică dintre vecinii magrebieni pe Hassan Abouyoub, ambasadorul Marocului la București. Sunt Cristina Cileacu. Începe Pașaport diplomatic.
O istorie tensionată între două națiuni care nu și-au manifestat deseori prietenia. Sunt nu doar vecine, ci aproape surori. Au o frontieră comună de 1550 de kilometri, aceeași religie și cetățeni cu obiceiuri similare. Ce le separă într-o manieră care pare ireconciliabilă este ideologia politică diferită. Conflictul înghețat care stă de fapt la baza acestor tensiuni este disputa pe teritoriul Sahara de Vest sau Sahara Occidentală. Marocanii consideră regiunea a lor, în timp ce Algeria îi susține pe cei care au declarat independența acelei bucăți de deșert, frontul Polisario.
Hassan Abouyoub, Ambassador of Morocco, welcome again to Diplomatic Passport.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, this time we are talking about diplomatic breakdown between two neighbors. I'm talking about your country, Morocco, and Algeria. And the bottom line issue is the Western Sahara issue, which is nothing new, but now it resurfaces. And the question is, how come in this very moment this entire situation come up again into the public attention?
Well, it's a long process. It's not only the Sahara issue, it's more than that. We have to go back to the immediate past. By immediate past, I mean the after independence, the early 60s, late 50s. Because our relations with Algeria started with the liberation movements, because before it was France. There was no Algeria, it was France. And in this process, of course, we developed a lot of solidarities, a lot of common undertakings in fighting the French colonialism. In this parenthesis, we never dealt with the border boundaries issue, never. Because we thought that between brothers, this issue should be solved, let's say, normally, as we did it in a family. The history turned differently. The first agreement we signed with the so-called revolutionary provisional government was immediately, between brackets, cancelled by the new military government that expelled the civilians that conducted the independence process. And after that, of course, started the first war. We had almost four wars with Algeria, all linked to this issue of boundaries, Sahara. And why the Sahara issue? When Morocco decided to go to the International Justice Court, it happened immediately after the global agreement signed by Algeria and Morocco to completely close the issue of the boundaries. And the disputed territory, which is Tindouf and Kolom Bechar, were, of course, maintained in the Algerian sovereignty, but with the aim of common exploitation of resources, freedom of movement, freedom of transportation through the Sahara to Agadir, etc. Unfortunately, the implementation of these commitments didn't appear on the table. And we, Moroccan government decided, the king decided not to ratify this agreement. The non-ratification of this agreement, coming with a decision of the International Justice Court, created a panic in Algeria. They said, Morocco maybe is playing a game with us. Maybe he'll go to the International Justice to revisit the agreement we made on boundaries, which is not true at all. So all the commitments taken in this framework till today are completely frozen. And you understand then that the problem is not only an issue of the disputed territory, it's more than leadership issues. It is the conflict between two governance models. A lot of asymmetries are existing between Morocco and Algeria. History. Our history, as you know, the first Muslim king in Morocco was in 789. The actual monarchy is going towards almost 400 years. And you understand then that this disbalance creates a lot of particularities. I'll put it like that. It means that we have the same language, it's true. The same religion, it's true. But the particularities are very big. And because of that, we have to take into consideration the Algerian need of a certain time to build its own nation, to integrate all the contradictions. What we did centuries ago, Morocco decided, under the guidance of His Majesty, to reopen all the historical files, to open a reconciliation process. It took time, but we did it. And we closed this issue of repression in the 60s, 70s. These differences, of course, are not the real assets that we can build on for the Maghreb, a huge myth and dream. And you can understand then that it's beyond the Sahara issue. To conclude, it's a matter of discrepancies, asymmetries in our historical process, in our governance, in our democracy, etc.
King Mohammed VI had a declaration saying that Western Sahara is not a negotiable issue, and the question could be then, what is negotiable in the matter of relationship of Morocco and Algeria?
The issue of Sahara was created by Algeria under the influence of the Soviet Union. This was in the map of geopolitics of former Soviet Union. The access to the Mediterranean and the access to the Atlantic are the big dreams.
Of Russia.
Of Russia, now Russia. And it's not only this geopolitics, it's also the fact that the Algerians know very well that there is no alternative of the Moroccan territorial integrity, because it's Morocco. We are not occupying Sahara. Sahara was ours before the Spanish invaded it. They know that very well. And the International Justice Court said it very clearly in its consultative advice or decision. It's not a terra nullius. And there were relationships between the kingdoms, the kings, and the population there. So how can Algeria say that we are occupying the territory? So the change is not natural. And it's because the decision-making process in Algeria is still a military decision-making process. And because of that, when there is lack of freedom of press, freedom of, let's say, opinion, it's very difficult to deal with these issues. If it's a more democratic environment, I'm sure the Sahara issue will disappear. Because the people of Algeria know very well the history of it, the big components of it, and they know very well that it's a major impediment in the building process of the Maghreb. Because the Maghreb is one imperative choice for all of us to face the big challenges we have to face. We're wasting time. We're wasting time, big time, if I may say so. And we cannot rely on the solution of an artificial conflict by, let's say, the international system if the main player that created it, that still maintain it, is not ready to cope with us. And there is no other solution but to, let's say, close definitely with a political solution as it is decided by Security Council. We are ready for that. His Majesty said it big time, but we cannot negotiate the Moroccanity of the Sahara. No Moroccan citizen will accept it. It's very clear. It's part of us, it's part of our history, of our multiple identity processes, and of course Algeria knows that very well.
Since Algeria knows that very well, and you said that the people of Algeria also know the history, this specific history, we are noticing right now, since it's the 21st century, a new phenomenon, and I'm talking about the dispute over the cultural heritage. If you watch the social media, you can see that right now this dispute, diplomatic dispute between Morocco and Algeria, rise to the level where people are saying the couscous is ours, the tagine is ours, the kaftan is ours. Of course, the identity of a people, of a country, is not lying in the kaftan or in the couscous. But this type of approach doesn't steer the nationalism in both Morocco and Algeria?
You're absolutely right in the way you posed the issue, which is a global issue. We have a heritage. It's called colonial boundaries. Not only in North Africa, in the Middle East, it's even worse. These colonial powers created maps, not nations. We are facing now the upheaval of regionalism, of minorities, and obviously the concept of national sovereignty is jeopardized by these huge influences, energies that are coming bottom up. And we understand, we observe that the governments, the powers in place, are very weak in front of that. So in my opinion, I think we have to think twice about what Morocco suggested to solve the issue of the Sahara. It's not that autonomy came like this. It's a deeply studied, it's a deeply thought, and we suggested that because it's the only solution to handle what I would call the rights of minorities within the framework of a nation. And this can be applied to all the situations like this we are now observing in Sahel, in Ethiopia, in Libya, the process of rebuilding Libya, in Tunisia, in Algeria, everywhere we have the issues of minorities, and we need to reinvent a concept under the UN umbrella that reinterprets the famous principle that we all share, we all respect: self-determination. Self-determination, yes, but integral territoriality, yes, and the protection of the rights of these minorities. And Romania is a very good example. Your history is very, very like ours. But you were successful in handling the 18 or 17 minorities you have under the umbrella of a nation, protecting the interest and the rights of these Hungarian, Bessarabian, name it. And it is natural that it works like this. And what eases your job is your adhesion to the European Union. My dream as a Maghreb citizen is to find a Maghreb unified, because in opening the borders within the Maghreb, all this issue of minorities, of peculiarities, identities can be dissolved.
And if we talk about Sahel, this is a region that also means danger when it comes to terrorism, because this is the new terra for developing this type of phenomenon. And both Morocco and Algeria are the first one affected by the threats, and also having to handle with the terrorist threats in the region, and not only being a sort of the peacekeeper for the rest of the world. What could happen if your countries are now diplomatically not working together? I can only assume that they don't work together at the level of intelligence as well.
Which is true, and we regret it deeply. You're right in posing on the table this very hot issue. The security of Europe in the next 20 years will depend on how Europe will deal with this region of the world. Because demography is demography. We cannot stop it by a decree or an international treaty. We all know that millions of Africans with no hope, have the only solution to go north, only left solution. So the immigration that is now the priority of all the political debates in Europe is nothing compared to what is coming. And in this environment of failed states, of a huge desert, it is obvious that we have the playing field of all terrorism, trafficking, name it. And in this connection, a united approach of Morocco and Algeria is compulsory. It's a pity that it's not happening. It's not, we are ready for that. We're all ready. His Majesty 10 times invited Algeria to a dialogue, to reopen, let's say, the files, to rebuild. Because if Morocco and Algeria are not involved together within the framework of the same approach, I'm afraid one of the major failures of Europe in terms of security will be the non-handling, the non-management of the huge Sahel issue. And here I come to the situation we are living now within this geopolitical approach to the North Africa or Maghreb. I think it's time to end the hypocrisy. And Europe should push the main players to be on the right lane. In my opinion, we are hiding within the framework of neutrality, which means nothing. Neutrality is creating huge threats to everybody, and now it is time to say basta. It is time to say basta. And in this case, all the players will be entering in a win-win situation. Of course, it's so true. If you look at what happened in Algeria the last 3 years, you understand the Algerian people, my brothers, are really keen to have a new era. And it participates to the same goal. We have to be very clever in looking forward and finding the solutions of a big mutual cooperation between all the Maghreb countries, which means we need to address Libya in a very voluntarist approach way. We need to look at what is happening in Tunisia, and I should even enlarge the scope and go beyond and see Egypt, see all this part of the world that is critical for the Mediterranean and of course for the Europe.
You already mentioned quite a lot of issues of Maghreb, and we had Morocco, Algeria, we had Egypt, Ethiopia, we had two Libyas in the same country because it's West versus East. Everyone is supported by somebody else, not to mention Mali and the rest of Africa. Is there any hope? I mean, this kind of problems should be solved by the people living in those countries. The international community should only have the umbrella for that.
Absolutely. No imported solution can be considered or is feasible. The history showed very clearly that all the imported solutions, all the so-called internationally coherent made solutions failed. The field reacts differently. So any solution that is not coming bottom up, in my opinion, is not a feasible solution for the long run. So obviously, yes. But what is needed is to help these countries elaborate their own destiny.
Ambassador, if we have to draw a conclusion to this discussion, how would look the future of Maghreb, since the situation right now is a bit or more mixed up and nowhere is any solution in the near future?
Well, the Maghreb building process, which I participated in personally, is impeded mainly by the differences as asymmetries in terms of governance and democratic models. One of the solutions for Europe to help this Maghreb emerging and for the Maghreb to play a role in the Sahel issue is maybe to reconsider a kind of a dialogue, a large dialogue, involving the 5 Mediterranean countries of Europe, the 5 members of the Maghreb Union, and the 5 states of the Sahel, and build a new, let's say, regional scheme of cooperation with common goals, with shared responsibility, with a kind of democratic control of the policies, and this could be a new way to deal with this huge amount of challenges. And it is possible.
Let's keep this optimism, Ambassador. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.
Atât pentru astăzi, dar rămânem în continuare online pe pagina de Facebook a emisiunii și pe contul nostru de Twitter. Revenim cu subiecte noi din lumea diplomației și a politicii externe, vinerea viitoare de la 11:30 și reluare sâmbătă de la 22:30. La revedere!